Your birth certificate can tell you how many years you've been alive. It cannot tell you how sharp your mind still is, how steady your legs feel on the stairs, or how much life you still have left to build. I've met 79-year-olds who move through their day with more clarity and confidence than people half their age. And I've met 60-year-olds who've quietly started shrinking their own world without realizing it. The difference was almost never luck. I'm Dr. Robert Vance, and for a long time now, my work has centered on one question I think about almost every day. What actually separates the older adults who stay sharp, strong, and engaged with life from those who fade earlier than they need to? Not in theory, in real, ordinary daily life. What I've found again and again is that it usually isn't one dramatic decision. It's a small collection of everyday patterns so ordinary that most people walk right past them without noticing how much weight they carry. Today, I want to walk you through 6 of them. These are the things I consistently notice in older adults who remain mentally clear, physically capable, and genuinely engaged with their lives well past 75. I won't promise you a miracle, and I won't tell you these guarantee anything. What I can tell you is that they're backed by a meaningful body of research on healthy aging, and I've watched them play out in real people's lives for years. One thing before we go further, when I say every day, I don't mean every single one of these has to happen identically, every day, without fail. Movement might look different day to day. Strength training might happen a few times a week rather than daily, but the underlying rhythm, the general presence of these habits woven into daily life, tends to show up consistently in the people I'm describing. Think of it less as a rigid checklist and more as a lifestyle that keeps repeating itself. And the last of these 6, I'll be honest, is the one I think gets overlooked the most. Not because people don't understand it, but because somewhere along the way, a lot of people quietly stop believing they're still allowed to need it or pursue it. I'll come back to that one because I think it ties everything else together. If you're watching, tell me your age in the comments, and as we go, notice which of these already feel familiar and which have quietly slipped away. Let's start with the one that tends to show up first because it's the foundation everything else is built on. Let's talk about movement. When most people hear exercise in the context of aging, they picture something intimidating. I want to set that image aside because it's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something more practical. The ability to get out of a chair without pushing yourself up with your hands. The ability to walk to the mailbox without worrying about your balance. The ability to climb a short flight of stairs without your heart pounding, or carry groceries in from the car without setting the bag down twice. Researchers often call this functional strength, and I think it's one of the most underappreciated ideas in the entire conversation about aging. It's not about how much you can lift. It's about whether your body still lets you participate in your own life. Here's something worth understanding. Aging and inactivity are not the same thing, even though they get tangled together. Much of the decline we associate with getting older, the stiffness, the slower steps, the loss of muscle, is influenced heavily by inactivity, not simply by the passage of time. Research on aging muscle consistently points toward this. Bodies that keep moving, keep some resistance in their routine, and keep challenging balance tend to preserve strength and stability far longer than bodies that gradually stop asking anything of themselves. I think of a woman I once knew, and I want to be clear, this is an illustrative composite, not a single identifiable case. In her early 70s, after a minor fall in her kitchen, she became quietly afraid. She started avoiding the stairs. She stopped her usual walk because of one uneven section of sidewalk. She began asking her son to carry things she used to carry herself. None of these were dramatic decisions on their own, but together over about a year, her world had quietly shrunk. Her legs grew weaker, not because she was simply aging, but because she'd stopped asking them to do very much, which made her more afraid to use them, which made her use them even less. The seniors who stay sharp and capable tend to interrupt that cycle before it fully forms. That doesn't mean pushing through pain. It means staying in relationship with movement, walking regularly, some form of resistance work, whether light weights, bands, or simply standing up and sitting down from a chair repeatedly, and practicing balance intentionally. Because balance fades when it isn't used and can often be rebuilt when it is. If you're dealing with a chronic condition, joint pain, or a history of falls, please talk with your doctor or a physical therapist before starting something new. That's not a disclaimer to cover myself. It's genuinely good advice. The goal was never to look a certain way. It's independence, traveling to see your grandchildren without dreading the airport, gardening, dancing at a wedding, getting down on the floor and back up without a struggle. Movement done consistently protects your ability to keep saying yes to your own life. But movement is only half the equation. Your body doesn't just need to be challenged, it needs the chance to recover. And that brings us to something that shifts for almost everyone as they age, something people often feel embarrassed about, even though it's one of the most natural changes in the whole process. Let's talk about sleep. If your sleep isn't quite what it used to be, you're far from alone. Many older adults wake earlier or wake in the night and struggle to drift back off, or find that a full night just doesn't feel as restorative as it once did. This is real and common, but I want to gently push back on one thing. Persistent poor sleep shouldn't automatically be written off as just aging and left unaddressed. Sleep is when your body repairs the muscle tissue you challenge through movement. It's when your brain consolidates memories and processes the emotional weight of the day. Researchers have consistently found associations between poor sleep quality and difficulties with memory, attention, and mood. One rough night won't damage your brain, but over time, sleep is one of the quiet foundations everything else rests on. A few things tend to help, though I won't hand you one rigid formula. Consistency matters, going to bed and waking around similar times, even on weekends. Morning light exposure helps reinforce your body's internal clock. Staying active during the day, which circles right back to movement, tends to support deeper sleep at night. And being thoughtful about naps matters too. A short nap earlier in the day can be refreshing, while a long nap late in the afternoon can quietly steal from that night's sleep. The hour before bed matters as well, reducing bright screens and stimulating content. A calming pre-sleep routine, and a comfortable, reasonably dark and quiet room all tend to support better rest. I won't tell you the exact temperature your bedroom should be. That genuinely varies. Pay attention to what actually helps you personally. A few things deserve real medical attention. Loud, persistent snoring paired with gasping or choking during sleep can signal sleep apnea, a common and very treatable condition. Severe daytime sleepiness is also worth raising with your doctor. These aren't things to quietly push through. I think there's an emotional layer here that doesn't get discussed enough. A lot of older adults feel almost embarrassed by their changing sleep, as though needing rest is some kind of failure. It isn't. Needing rest is not weakness, it's part of being human, and it deserves the same care as any other part of your health. When sleep is working well, it becomes the foundation everything else stands on. But sleep and movement alone don't build a strong body. Even the strongest muscles need the right raw materials to repair themselves. And that brings us to something a lot of aging bodies quietly struggle with, often without anyone noticing until real weight has been lost. Let's talk about protein and nutrition. There's a common and dangerous myth that eating less is simply natural with age, something to accept without concern. Appetite can genuinely change, but unexplained or significant weight loss should never be dismissed. It deserves attention, because behind it is usually a story worth understanding. Protein matters here for a specific reason. As we age, our bodies naturally tend to lose muscle mass, a process researchers call sarcopenia. Adequate protein, especially paired with the resistance-based movement we already discussed, appears to help slow this process and support strength. I won't hand you one universal number of grams per day. Individual needs vary based on body size, activity level, kidney function, other medical conditions, and appetite. This is genuinely worth discussing with your doctor or a dietitian, especially if you have kidney concerns. What I can offer are realistic, accessible sources: fish, eggs, dairy, poultry, beans, lentils, tofu, and other options depending on your preferences and dietary needs. Some research suggests spreading protein across meals throughout the day rather than getting most of it in one sitting may support muscle maintenance for some older adults. Consider it. Don't treat it as a rigid rule. Here's what doesn't get talked about enough. Nutrition struggles in older adults are rarely about a lack of knowledge. They're usually about something else: reduced appetite from age or medication, dental problems, difficulty swallowing, or the quiet loneliness of cooking for one after decades of cooking for a family or a spouse. I think of another illustrative composite, a man in his late 70s, whose wife had passed the year before. For decades, she'd done most of the cooking. After she was gone, his meals slowly simplified to toast and crackers, whatever was easiest to prepare for one person. It wasn't laziness or ignorance. It was grief wrapped in the practical reality of cooking alone and it showed up as gradual, unintentional weight loss his family took months to notice. This is why unexplained weight loss deserves real attention rather than being brushed off as normal aging. Sometimes it points to something medical. Sometimes, like this, it points to something emotional and circumstantial that deserves just as much compassion. Good nutrition isn't about a perfect diet. It's about giving your body the raw materials it needs to maintain strength and keep you feeling capable. It's an act of ongoing self-respect, even on days it doesn't feel special. Interestingly, one thing that often makes nutrition easier is something that seems unrelated on the surface: staying socially connected, sharing a meal, having a reason to cook something worth sitting down for. Which brings us to a habit I think is far more powerful and far more misunderstood than most people realize. Let's talk about social connection. Social connection often gets treated like a nice bonus entertainment for your free time. I don't see it that way, and neither does the research on healthy aging. Meaningful connection appears linked to mood, purpose, and cognitive engagement in ways that go well beyond having something fun to do. I don't mean you need a huge circle of friends. Some of the most emotionally grounded, mentally sharp older adults I've encountered have a relatively small social world. What matters isn't the size of the network, it's the presence of at least some meaningful, regular connection. A weekly call with a daughter, a standing coffee date with a former coworker, a conversation with a neighbor while watering the garden. I want to avoid the kind of dramatic comparison you sometimes see online, claiming loneliness is exactly as harmful as smoking a certain number of cigarettes. I don't think that's honest or necessary. What research does consistently show is an association between social isolation, loneliness, and poor outcomes related to mood, cognitive function, and overall well-being. That's real and important on its own. If you're feeling isolated right now, that isn't your fault. Isolation in later life often has real, understandable causes. Retirement quietly removing the built-in social structure a job provided for decades, the loss of a spouse or close friends, relocating closer to family but away from the community you spent a lifetime building, or mobility limitations that make it physically harder to get out. None of these are character flaws. They deserve compassion, not blame. Rebuilding connection almost never requires a dramatic overhaul. It usually starts small, reaching out to one person you've been meaning to call, trying a single community class or group activity once, volunteering for an hour, joining a group centered around a shared interest. The goal isn't rebuilding an entire social world overnight. It's opening one door. Something I find genuinely fascinating is how connected this is to the next habit. Meaningful conversation isn't just emotionally nourishing, it's cognitively demanding in the best way. Following someone else's story, remembering details, picking up on humor and nuance. This engages memory, attention, and mental flexibility all at once. Staying socially connected is, in a real sense, a form of exercising your mind, which brings us naturally to the next habit. Let's talk about cognitive challenge and lifelong learning. There's a real difference between passive entertainment and active cognitive engagement, and they aren't the same thing. Watching television is a perfectly fine way to relax. I'm not telling you to stop, but it doesn't ask much of your brain. It doesn't require problem solving, retrieving information, or adapting to something new. Active cognitive engagement is different. It involves genuine challenge and often a little productive struggle. This can take countless forms: learning a new language, even slowly, learning an instrument, painting or drawing, writing, whether a journal or letters to grandchildren, studying a period of history that interests you, learning new technology, which I know can feel intimidating but genuinely counts, trying an unfamiliar recipe instead of the same 10 meals on rotation, joining a discussion group where ideas get exchanged. I won't tell you any single activity guarantees your mind stays sharp forever. That would be dishonest. What research on cognitive aging does consistently point toward is that novelty, challenge, and sustained engagement appear to support cognitive function over time. The key ingredients seem to be learning something genuinely new rather than repeating what you've mastered, engaging attention and memory actively, and returning to the challenge with some regularity. Here's something that matters just as much as the science, maybe more. Older adults are allowed to be beginners again. A lot of people quietly stop trying new things because they feel embarrassed about being bad at something, especially in front of younger people or themselves. I want to gently release you from that pressure. The goal was never expertise. It's the engagement itself, the small satisfaction of getting slightly better at something you were terrible at 3 weeks ago. I think of another composite example, a man who decided in his late 70s to finally learn piano, something he'd wanted since childhood. He was quite bad at it for months, but he kept showing up to it, a little most days, and over a year, something shifted, not just in his playing, but in how he described himself. He started calling himself someone who was learning piano, rather than someone who used to be able to do things and now mostly wasn't. That shift in identity matters just as much as any measurable cognitive benefit. So far, we have a fairly complete picture. Movement protects independence. Sleep lets your body and mind recover. Nutrition provides raw materials for strength. Connection nourishes your emotional world and quietly exercises your mind. Learning keeps your brain actively engaged. But there's a question underneath all of this I haven't addressed yet, and I think it might be the most important one. What actually makes someone want to keep doing any of this? Let's talk about purpose, adaptability, and resilience. This is the habit I mentioned at the start, the one I think gets overlooked most, not because it's obscure, but because a lot of people quietly stop believing they're still allowed to have it. Purpose often gets associated almost automatically with career, with big public accomplishments. When someone retires, or their children move away, or their abilities change, a quiet and painful assumption can creep in that their chapter of mattering has closed. I want to push back on that directly. Purpose doesn't require a career or a grand mission. It can come from family, from mentoring someone younger, navigating something you've already lived through, from volunteering, from tending a garden and watching something grow because of your care, from faith, from creativity, from continuing to learn, from caring for a pet who depends on you, from helping a neighbor, or simply working quietly toward a personal goal. I won't tell you to simply think positive. That phrase on its own can feel dismissive of real pain. I want to acknowledge something honestly. Aging often comes with real grief. The loss of people you love, of abilities you used to take for granted, sometimes fear about what's ahead, sometimes real loneliness. These aren't things to think your way out of. What I've observed again and again in older adults who remain genuinely engaged with life isn't the absence of hardship. It's something different. Resilience doesn't mean never suffering. It means continuing to adapt and engage with life while carrying real difficulty. It means grieving someone you loved and still finding a reason to water the garden the next morning. It means losing a physical ability and finding a different way to stay involved rather than giving up on it altogether. And here's what I find most meaningful about this final habit. It doesn't stand alone. It threads through everything we've discussed today. Purpose often motivates someone to go for that walk on a day they don't feel like it. Connection supports resilience, because carrying difficulty is easier when you're not carrying it alone. Learning something new creates curiosity about tomorrow. Good nutrition supports the physical capacity to actually go do the things that give your life meaning. Sleep supports the emotional steadiness to face each day. These 6 habits were never really 6 separate items on a list. They form one connected way of living, each quietly supporting the others. If what you're feeling goes beyond ordinary sadness, if you're experiencing persistent hopelessness, significant anxiety, or any thoughts of harming yourself, please reach out to a mental health professional or a crisis support service in your area. That pain deserves real support, not just a video, and there's no shame in asking for help. Seeking support during hard seasons is itself a form of resilience. So where does this leave us? I don't think the goal was ever to become 30 again. That was never realistic. And I don't think most people genuinely want that anyway. What people actually want is quieter and more meaningful. To make the most of the life, the body, the mind, the relationships, and the time they actually have right now, at whatever age they are. Walking confidently to your car without a second thought about your balance. Carrying your own groceries in from the driveway. Remembering your grandchild's birthday without writing it down 3 times. Sitting down to learn something new, badly at first, and not caring. Laughing with an old friend on the phone about nothing in particular. Helping your daughter carry boxes on moving day. Getting your hands dirty in a garden and watching something grow because of your effort. Waking up with something, even something small, that you're genuinely looking forward to that day. That's what these 6 habits are actually building toward. Not a magazine cover version of aging. A real, textured, capable, connected life. Before I let you go, I want to be honest about something. This video is meant to be educational, and I hope it's been genuinely useful, but it's not a substitute for personalized medical advice. Your body, your history, and your circumstances are unique, And if anything here resonates or raises questions, please bring it up with your own doctor, who knows your situation far better than any video could. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me your age and be honest with me. Which of these 6 habits do you already have a solid handle on? And just as importantly, which one do you know deep down you've been quietly neglecting? There's no judgment here. Naming it is usually the first real step toward changing it. And if this kind of conversation is useful to you, if you want more honest, practical, science-informed guidance on aging with strength and clarity and dignity, I'd be glad to have you stick around. Subscribe to the channel, and I'll keep bringing you exactly this kind of conversation. Take care of yourself, I mean that, and I'll see you in the next one.